Let's discuss the policy of the Naira redesign itself. And in the studio, we actually have a public affairs analyst, Emmanuel Osemeka, joining us to discuss this. Good morning, and thank you for joining us once again on Daybreak.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
All right, so before we move into, what is actually happening right now due to the policy, can you share with us your thoughts on the Naira redesign itself and the consequences of the redesign?
I think in the real sense of it, the Naira redesign was a fantastic policy. The major challenge is the implementation. Many have argued that the timing was wrong. Many have said that, in an election year, you ought not to come up with such policies and all that. But I think that is sort of an argument to, just like giving a dog a bad name, just to, hang it. Because the truth is, there's no particular time that is right or wrong for any policy that is good for the people. Because, for example, one of the major gains of this Naira redesign policy, and of course the cashless policy we have in this country today, is the fact that kidnappings have almost become a thing of the past. I have a friend who traveled from Owerri to Onitsha, and she was, hailing the Naira redesign. And I was saying that CBN should not allow cash to come back, because they can't remember the last time they heard, this person was kidnapped or that person was kidnapped for ransom and all that, because the absence of cash, made it impossible for also kidnap for ransom to have. Because when you kidnap someone and they don't have cash to give you, what do you expect them to give you? So that's one angle or aspect of it. But the major challenge basically is to the extent that the mode of implementation, was mad, with some, should I call it, inconsistencies with what probably, was planned. Maybe as a result of the elections, where the politicians mopped up cash as soon as they came into the banking hall and all that. And of course, some of the plans that the banks had on their own. Because I know that a lot of banks were getting as much as 500,000 a day to give out to the populace, which is a misnomer. Unlike last week Friday, when the CBN began to give each branch of the bank as much as 25 million per day. So this used to be what it was, 25 million per day, as against 500,000. So if you check what 25 million per day will do in a branch of a bank versus 500,000 in a branch of a bank, you see the difference.
Well, all right. So, still talking about the policy itself now, before we get to the challenges and everything. One of the things that we were sold on when it came on was they're doing it now in an election year so that vote buying will be reduced.
Absolutely.
Elections have come and gone. Did we see that?
During the presidential election, yes, we did. We saw it clearly. It was very obvious that the policy, contributed positively, and to a very large extent, negated, or reduced in the incidences of vote buying. You saw on television where some communities in Ikorodu were shouting that they've not gotten their money because they were promised salad, and several other locations and all that. But if you fast forward a little bit, the postponement, of course, the judgment came barely a week to the governorship election of 11th, but the election was shifted to 18th, and that gave room for the vote buying to be implemented properly. And you notice that before the presidential election, you didn't hear the issues, challenges where political parties or political gladiators or political players, either the candidate of a particular election endorsing a particular candidate of another party, or the chairman of a state party section endorsing. But during the governorship, just that week, you saw all manner of endorsement, all manner of confusion. Some things began to happen at that time. So if you look at it critically, you will see that money played a major role in the governorship election as against the presidential election. So that's one of the things that cashless policy did. Though Nigerians suffered a great deal, but it contributed positively to what we had. Look at the diverse nature of the incoming 10th assembly. With that's a result of lack of money for that election, and see the difference.
Okay, now the NLC actually had prior plans to, picket all CBN offices and, and strike and all that, until delegates were actually sent to them, and the CBN decided to give a directive that bankers should start working Saturday, Sunday to, cushion the effect of the Naira scarcity. Now, if they had actually gone on that strike, would it have made any difference?
Well, the reality is that the leadership of the Nigerian Labour Congress changed. And if you know Comrade Joe Ajero, is not somebody you play pranks with. He's not somebody you play tete-a-tete with. He's a man who understands the rudiments of labor. He understands the tools, at his disposal. And he's a man that is loved by his colleagues, and over the years he's proven that he's someone who understands the game. I mean, look at his antecedent from his days when they split the union into two. They had to placate him for many years before they finally sheathed their swords, and of course he continued as the leader of the electricity union. Look at the level of impact he's had in favor of electricity workers, and the amount of strike they went on. So when an NLC president in the likes of Joe Ajero gives an order like that, trust me, CBN knows better not to play games with him. And so, was their plan to change the mode of implementation before the NLC planned strike? We are not sure. If they were, then fantastic. It became a fantastic coincidence. But the reality is that you have a new sheriff in town in the NLC, and these are people who understand the game of labor as against the last leadership of NLC.
All right. So right now, with the current mode of implementation that we're seeing, are we saying that the process is completely reversed, or is there how would we see the policy now evolving going forward? Because back then there was no cash. Now cash is coming back into the system, and they said that part of the main drivers of the policy was that they wanted to mop up excess cash that was in circulation. But if that money is being pumped back into circulation, then are we not going back to where we came from?
Very unfortunate, actually. I think I was on this show, twice, and we talked about this cashless policy, and I made it clear that there is one major objective for this cashless policy design, besides the mop-up of the cash. Of course, the CBN was very clear that the cash in circulation, the cash they pushed out is about 3.4 trillion, and in the bank you have less than 500 billion. Meaning that about 2.4 or thereabout, or 2.7 is outside. Now, they eventually mopped up between 2.1 trillion and 2.4 trillion, meaning that you had about 700 billion or almost a trillion, about a trillion plus outside the banking system. Now, they've been able to mop up like, call it 70% or 60%, according to their records, according to what they've said. And of course, the Supreme Court judgment came. They can hide under the Supreme Court judgment and tell us all kinds of things, but the reality is that they've practically reversed everything that they came up with. They came up with the issue of minimal cash withdrawal, over-the-counter withdrawals and the third-party withdrawals. Now, they've gone back to what it used to be, 500,000, 5 million for corporate and the likes. So what it means is that within the next 1 week or thereabouts, this cashless thing will be thrown out the window. What I expected them to have done was to increase the infrastructure of the banking, the deposit money bank, so that you can use e-channels seamlessly. Because one of the things that actually negated the implementation of this 100% cashless system is the fact that the e-channels were not functional. So you want to make transaction between us, I can be here from 7 o'clock, I continue to transfer money. It wouldn't go. It's frustrating. children are in school, they're not able to get money to buy things. People are traveling, they're not able to use money or buy. You want to buy ticket, you can't buy ticket. You want to make a transaction. In fact, many of us began to look like we're criminals because you want to buy something, you're constantly transferring, it's not going. And when it finally goes, maybe if 5 of it will go. And if you have 100,000, you're trying to do 20,000, you just ask the person the rest of the way to reverse it because it's a major issue and all that. So those are some of the things that didn't really go well, which we expected the CBN to sit down with the banks to look at what were these challenges with the e-channels, with a view to improving it. But it's still not late. They still need to do something about the e-channels and other, channels that they brought out before we go 100% again, because I see them coming back with such policy. But of course it's subject to the new government that is coming.
All right, well, despite the CBN's directive for weekend work and the commercial banks releasing cash, some Nigerians have actually said they're yet to feel the impact, and they've alleged that some banks have refused to heed the directive of the CBN as well. What would you advise?
Well, when the implementation began, the CBN had a system where they pushed out a lot of their staff, the senior staff members, to monitor and, of course, enforce compliance. Likewise, you can't sit down. I mean, what has happened over time is that the CBN has been pretty docile. So their monitoring and supervisory role were more or less not even in existence, because it looked like the financial system were on autopilot. But I believe they need to push out a lot of their staff members, the senior staff members, to go do the monitoring, supervisions, and ensure.
The CBN governor said he will personally monitor himself.
Unfortunately,
he can't be everywhere.
He's just one person. He can only go to 2 or 3 banks in Abuja, and don't forget, Nigerians, he's not the best friends of Nigerians right now. So I wonder how you're going to.
It will be ill-advised.
It will be ill-advised. It's not even advised that he should do that. He has other deputy governors, he has directors, he has deputy directors, assistant directors, and the CBN is a massive institution. I mean, they can do monitoring, they can do supervision, they can do enforcement without even the CBN governor getting out of his office. He shouldn't try to be clever by half by trying to tell us he will do monitoring by himself. So I think this is what they need to do now. But I know that, like my bank, my bank clearly told me that from Friday last week, they worked Saturday and Sunday, they were getting 25 million for each of their branches, which happened last in August or October 2022. From December, January, they were getting about $1 million per branch. So when you put $1 million in the ATM, in 10 minutes,
it's finished.
It's gone. So we have 25 billion, and now even 25 million is still small. But the idea, like when you look at some of the things that's happening, in the US, where banks failed, certain regional banks failed, the Silicon Valley Bank failed. What was the reason why the bank failed? Because almost everyone went to the bank at the same time to withdraw their money. That's not the way the banks were created. Banks were created in such a way that you and I cannot come to the bank at the same time. So I can go today, you will go tomorrow, next tomorrow, and all that. So it keeps circulating like that. Unfortunately, the wrong signals were sent as a result of the hike in interest rate, and of course the bonds that the banks were holding to hold a lot of their security, went low. Then of course they panicked, and the information got out, so people got scared and wanted to withdraw their money. From that withdrawal, the bank became insolvent, unfortunately, and of course it affected quite a few other banks like that. And that's one of the things that they need to check with our banks, with the way people are rushing to withdraw their money, because people are withdrawing money and converting them to foreign currency and keeping cash because they are not sure
what's going to happen
the next time they're going to get cash. So those are some of the challenges that we're having.
All right, so you said you see the CBN coming back somewhere down the line to reintroduce the policy again.
Yes.
So do you expect them to do something different, or what do you expect to see them do differently from what they've already done so far?
You see, one of the things I also see in days ahead is that, subject to the position of the incoming government. I mean, we have a president-elect. Without prejudice to the cases in court, I mean, fantastic cases and fantastic prayers, but of course the court will decide that. But of course we have a president-elect, he will form a government, given the fact that the Court of Appeal, which is the first court of the first instance for the presidential election, will definitely have 6 months to come up. So if you look at 6 months, that means the president-elect will be sworn in, definitely. So without prejudice to all of that, the new government, if you recall, that the president-elect was seriously opposed to this policy. He felt that the policy is not bad, but he was opposed to the implementation strategy. And of course, given the fact that there were a lot of controversy surrounding the membership of the CBN governor with their party, and of course his desire to run and going to court to stop government from sacking him or from and what have you and all that. So if you look at all of that, you will see that the coming days will be quite interesting, because for a man who openly criticized that policy and who, directly, went out, after the CBN governor's jugular, you would expect that he would come with certain, plans, because the Supreme Court judgment says till 31st of December. So what it means is that there's an expiry date for the old Naira notes. So,
which a lot of people seem to forget.
Exactly. That's I want to remind us that there's an expiry date for the old Naira 1,500 and the 200. Then from the 1st of January 2024, you go back. We're supposed to go back to that cashless policy. And between now and then, I expect, and I stand to be corrected, and I hope that I'm proven wrong, that the incoming government will come up with their own idea of how cashless policy will begin. Don't forget, the cashless policy began some years back with, I think, 6 states. Then, of course, it expanded to about 12 states. And it's been like that. And the idea of the phased implementation of the cashless policy is to the extent that we have coverage. And of course, to enable the banks also improve on the infrastructures and all that. Then, of course, we suddenly came and said, 36 states and the FCT, everybody go straight into cashless policy. That is one of the errors that, plagued this particular implementation, which I believe that maybe most likely you have people who would have taken a post-mortem of the challenges associated with this particular implementation, with a view to probably providing much better solutions and better implementation. I see a further phased implementation as against the totality of 36 states and the FCT, or of course they can decide otherwise.
Now, aside the monetary policy, the CBN has also increased the interest rate to 10%. What do you think the impact will be on businesses and also average Nigerians?
Well, unfortunately, they had no choice on that, because, I mean, the essence, these are some of the measures they are using to defend the Naira. Okay, because Naira has, been beaten severally over the last couple of years, to the extent, because if you look at clearly, we have official exchange rate of 460 something. It went from 430 something to 460 something. I think it's about 470 something right now. Then you have the parallel market, which the CBN says they do not recognize. Unfortunately, that is the market where almost everybody operates. During the presidential debate and presidential conversation, you heard a lot of the presidential candidates, including the president-elect, the Labour Party man, and of course the PDP presidential candidate, and of course the NNPP presidential candidate. They were very clear on the fact that they are interested and they will support a single window. The single window means that between 470 and 700 and whatever, they are going to go somewhere, because that's the only way you are going to ensure that you have a controlled economy, or you can be able to have a projection that you can what's the word now, that you can measure. Today we have 470 and we have 700 plus. The question is, you decide to say, okay, that your KPIs will be based on the official window. What is the percentage of Nigerians who do international trade, legitimate international trade? What is the percentage that operate with the CBN window? Now, if you operate with the CBN window, what is the volume that you are able to do? And that is the reason why the economy is on the decline. And that has affected small businesses tremendously, because a lot of international transactions cannot happen because today you have limits to what you can do, even if you have a
you can't even use your local card.
Exactly.
You need to get a USD account.
When a single window is, introduced, what it means is that there will be liberalization, and we can go back to that open market system where you can sit in the comfort of your homes and do your transactions seamlessly. Even today, it's very difficult for a lot of international merchants to recognize our cards or our it's because of the command and control economic system that has been implemented by this administration, unfortunately. So that single window will help us, one, and of course this issue of interest rate hike will probably normalize. But of course, each time you hike interest rate, of course inflation is also fighting here and there, left and right. Food inflation is high.
And there are plans to even increase the VAT from 7.5 to 10%.
Unfortunately, these are backdoor channels you use to fight, but this style is counterproductive. It doesn't really help the ordinary person on the street.
You talked about some issues. Now we talked about harmonizing the market, having a one window for foreign exchange and all that. So then the government coming in now, what do you think they should prioritize apart from these things that you've actually mentioned? What else do they need to prioritize so that we can have at least a semblance of an equilibrium before everything goes haywire?
So as an agenda setting for the incoming administration, I think it's quite critical that we understand that one of the reasons why we also have the economic decline is because of the humongous criminal corruption that is going on with the subsidy regimes. So we have subsidy in petroleum PMS. We have subsidy in we used to have subsidy in electricity, but it's been reduced drastically. It's not out completely. Then we have subsidy in where we give tax holidays to a lot of the big companies and all that. I think the incoming government should prioritize scrapping all that, because those subsidies are money lost. Take for instance, the subsidy on PMS is costing Nigeria about 6 trillion. 6 trillion is massive. What it means is that the CBN is not even returning any foreign exchange. And once CBN does not, NNPC is not returning any foreign exchange. So it means that the CBN is not receiving any foreign exchange from NNPC. And once that happens, and which is a major plank on our foreign exchange earning, the agricultural sector is yet to give us the volume that the crude is giving us. Then of course prioritize gas. We have humongous gas deposit, but we're yet to do proper business with our gas system. Remove all those subsidies, you get a lot of money from that angle, and that will go back into the foreign exchange will come in, it will defend the Naira better, and of course it will also aid the single window that we talked about, and many of them accept. Then of course there are other economic strategies that will come up that it will also help to push up. But priority should be to remove subsidy on PMS, remove the remaining subsidy on electricity. Yes, it will increase electricity in certain quarters. Like I used to do 15,000 like 5 years ago. Now I do 70,000 a month. And my money has not gone up. So quite a number of us are paying without subsidy, but a lot of companies are enjoying the subsidy. I learned that for 2022-2021 the federal government gave a subsidy of as much as 16 trillion to businesses. And if you check the businesses, there are about 3 or 4 businesses that enjoy that subsidy. That's monies that Nigeria ought to earn, but they gave those subsidies.
All right, well, thank you so much, Mr. Emmanuel Osemeka, for joining us on the show today to have this very interesting conversation.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.